on, you guys. Where have you been, Matt? We couldn't find you after school.
Yeah, I thought you were going to shoot some baskets with us.
I was, but I had to go to the library for a while. After school? What were you doing? Oh, just trying to find some stuff for the class project.
What? The one about the people who explored the Australian coast? Haven't you finished it yet?
Finished it, but he hasn't even started it. You haven't started it, have you, Matt?
I was going to tonight, only all the books I want are out on loan.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, he's only joking, Lisa.
So what are you going to do now?
I don't know. I guess I'll have to ask Mum or Dad to take me down to the library again.
No. See you, guys.
Bye.
Lisa, look. Come on.
Be right with you. Well, I don't usually have such youthful customers. Can I do something for you?
The sign says you specialise in books on Australia.
Yes, that's right. Australia and Australiana. Mostly quite old books, though. Mostly very rare. Are you looking for something in particular?
Not really. Just something on exploration.
Exploration by sea.
Ah, sailors and such like, eh? Now, let me see. Yes, I think there just might be something. It'll be down the back there. You can go and have a look round if you like while I put these away.
Yes, thank you. Hey, I wonder what's in here.
Lisa, I don't
He
think...
said we could look around. Come on.
Wow, look at this, Lisa. Fantastic.
Dad, don't touch.
It's all right. You won't break it. It's meant to go round. What a guilty-looking pair you two are.
I'm sorry, we didn't know there was anyone in here.
Well, there isn't. Well, apart from me.
Who are you?
I'm the guardian, the caretaker. Call me what you will. I look after all this. But who are you?
I'm Matthew. Matt. And this is Lisa.
Good. Now that we know each other, how can I help you?
Help us?
Aren't you going to kick us out?
Oh, of course not. Well, you came in here from the bookshop, didn't you? So you were looking for something. If you tell me what it is, I'll find it for you.
Well, I'm doing a project at school on the Maritime exploration of Australia. You know, sailors and such like.
Only he's left it too late, and all the library books he wanted from school have already been taken out. So we were wondering if you might have something.
Why, I have everything on everything in here. Somewhere. Now, the library catalogue number for Australian history. 994, right?
Right. Do you want me to hold that, boy?
No thanks, man. But you and Lisa can take these as I pass them down. And this one. And this one. I think these will do. Let's go over here. Right then. How far back do you want to go?
How far back can we go?
Oh, ages if you want to. You see, scientists now believe that Australia was always separated from Asia by stretches of water. So even the first inhabitants would have had to cross the sea to get here.
You mean the Aborigines?
That's right. I see you've already done some research, Lisa. The Aborigines almost certainly migrated here from Southeast Asia. landing in the north in places like the Kimberleys, Arnhem Land and Cape York. And although it's difficult to say exactly when the first Australians arrived, we do know that they were here around 40,000 years ago.
But how? I mean, what sort of boats would they have had then?
Not boats exactly. They probably used rafts made of bamboo or wood, perhaps something like the ones used by some Aboriginal people today.
It's hard to imagine anyone exploring in those.
Well, that depends on what you mean by exploring, Matt. They did do some exploring by sea, but they were more interested in settling the land. It seems to me that you're thinking about the European exploration of Australia. And if you want to find out about that, we'll have to look somewhere much closer to your own time. Less than 1,000 years ago, probably. Because that was about the time that Europe was emerging from the Dark Ages. And adventurers like Marco Polo travelled to the far-off lands of Persia, India and China, opening up a rich new trade in gold, silks and spices. And some brought back tales of even greater treasures to be found on more distant shores.
Australia?
Maybe. It's possible that both Chinese and Arab sailors reached our coast as they traded with the nearby islands. And of course the islanders themselves may have been here. Oh yes, for hundreds of years fleets of Indonesian boats have fished our coastal waters. They fished for several months at a time, coming ashore to camp and preserve their catch. So I doubt if they would think that the beautiful land rich in gold and jewels described in here was Australia. Anyway, before the merchants back in Europe could worry too much about searching for new lands, they had other problems to deal with. The overland route they used to trade with the East was slow and dangerous, and their losses were high. They needed a better way to get there.
By sea?
That's right. Ships were the obvious choice. But before they could journey all that way, the sailors had to overcome their fear of
Falling off the edge of the world.
Yes, well, we can laugh about it now, Lisa. But for people back then, it was a very real fear. So real that sailors could actually name the places where the world was supposed to end, and nobody dared go beyond them.
But they did, eventually. So what changed their minds?
This man did. Prince Henry of Portugal, also known as Henry the Navigator, although he wasn't actually a sailor.
But how could someone...
Give him a chance to explain, Matt.
That is an excellent idea. We will let him explain.
I didn't mean...
I know what you meant, Lisa. But you've given me a good idea. In fact, it's so good, I don't know why I didn't think of it before. Come on.
Where are we going?
To let Prince Henry explain.
It would be a pleasure.
Your Highness, allow me to introduce Lisa and Matt.
Good morrow, children. I understand from our friend here that you wish to know something of how we came to sail past the end of the world. Well, not everyone believed this nonsense about the world being flat, but it was hard to break down the sailors' superstitions. After all, many who tried long voyages did disappear. And even those who returned told horrible stories of monsters and shipwrecks. But the real reason why so many were lost was that their ships were poor, and their methods of navigating and charting courses very crude. I was able to use my position and my money to gather around me the most knowledgeable people of my time, people versed in all the skills of sailing. And together, we developed new types of ships and improved methods of navigating and mapping. With these new tools and a little persuasion, Portuguese seamen like Diaz sailed all the way around Africa. Da Gama reached India, and others went as far as the Spice Islands. More countries followed our lead. Columbus reached the Americas, and Magellan sailed all the way across the Pacific. Although, alas, I did not live long enough to see this happen.
Nevertheless, Prince Henry had really paved the way for the great age of European exploration, which was to lead to the discovery, or if you like, the rediscovery of Australia.
Australia?
Forgive me, Your Highness. That is the name we now use for your unknown Southland.
Ah, Java la Grande. Do you know, there is some evidence to suggest that explorers from my country sighted this Australia of yours, which our map makers named Java la Grande. But alas, with only a few maps such as this to go on, who can say for sure? Curse that earthquake.
Thank you very much, Your Highness.
Yes, thank you. What did he mean about the earthquake?
Well, the countries of Europe were jealous of what they found through exploration. So all the records of the early Portuguese navigators were locked away in one building in Lisbon, the capital of Portugal. But in 1755, the city was destroyed by a fire and earthquake. And all those records, which may have contained more details about Java la Grande, were lost forever.
And the Spice Islands?
Ah, that was the old name for the Moluccas, one of the island groups of Indonesia. They were called the Spice Islands because they provided many of the spices which were eagerly sought after in Europe. In fact, bags of spices like these peppercorns and these cloves were literally worth their weight in gold. So the country which controlled the spice trade could command great wealth and power. Portugal dominated the trade for almost a century, but around 1600 the Dutch seized control and established themselves in the islands, which meant that they were very close to Australia.
And what are these? Nuts?
Not nuts, nutmeg.
Where are we going now?
Well, I thought that since we heard the first part of the story from Prince Henry, we might as well hear the rest of it straight from the people who lived it. Gentlemen and Madame, this is Matt and Lisa. They're doing some research on the maritime exploration of Australia, and I thought you might be able to fill in a few of the gaps for them.
Why not? We do have some experience at filling in gaps.
There you are. Everyone here was connected in some way with exploring the coast of Australia. So, who would you like to talk to first?
I didn't realise there were so many. Where are they all from?
Well, there's the British, of course, and the French, the Dutch, and these gentlemen here are from Spain.
Spain?
I didn't remember anything about the Spanish landing here.
Ah, that's possibly because they didn't. Although the Spanish are important because they opened up the Pacific to Europeans, which led to the eventual discovery of Australia's east coast. They themselves usually sailed well to the north of Australia, but some of their ships ventured further south and... but why am I telling you all this? Come on.
Buenos dias. Yo soy Luis Veyes.
Excuse me, the children don't speak Spanish.
My apologies. My name is Luis Veyes de Torres. Perhaps you have heard of me.
No.
Well, you should have. You see this passage between New Guinea and Australia? You see its name, eh? Torres Strait. Why do you think it is called that?
Because you discovered it?
Correct. My ship was one of 4 that sailed from South America to discover the mysterious southern continent and colonize it for Spain. Our leadership was swept away. I took command of the expedition and decided to make for the Philippines. On the way, I took the opportunity to sail around the southern coast of New Guinea, proving that it was, in fact, an island and not part of some greater southern continent, as shown in these old maps. That was in the year of our Lord 1606. Perhaps you would care to remind our Dutch colleagues of the fact when you speak to them,
Why did he want us to remind the Dutch about his voyage?
Oh, he's just slinging off at them because they didn't find his straits. You see, the Dutch wanted very much to find a route to the south of New Guinea, which would get them to the Pacific. No less than 4 separate expeditions were sent to search for an opening, and all failed to find it. Although it is on one of these expeditions that we have the first record of a European landing on mainland Australia. Ah, Governor Cohen.
So, Guardian, you have come to get the facts about the real discoverers of Australia.
Of course, Your Excellency. Who could forget the Dutch discoveries? Perhaps you'd like to tell Matt and Lisa how they came about.
Certainly. Let me see now. Has our friend here told you about the VOC?
VOC?
And the East Indies?
Oh, he means Indonesia.
I hope at least you know about the spice trade.
Oh, yes, and we know you took control of it from the Portuguese.
Good. But there were others who were keen to get control of it for themselves, or to pirate our ships as they made the long voyages to and from Holland. We soon discovered that the only way to protect our interests was for all the merchants and traders to form one large, powerful company, the United Dutch East India Company, or the VOC as it was commonly called. The governors, of course, of which I was one, were also keen to search for new areas of trade. And it was this exploration which led to the discovery of the Southland, which was the name we first gave to this Australia of yours. Willem, I think perhaps it would be best if the man who made the discovery told you his own story, don't you? Go on, Bill.
My name is Willem Jans.
Hello.
Hello.
How do you do? So you really discovered Australia?
Well, I was the first man from Europe to land here, although I must confess I did not know it was Australia. But let me explain. The expedition was by no means a large one. I had a crew of just 20 men and one small ship, a Bicentennial, with which I was to try to find the island of New Guinea. I was also to see if there was any possibility of trade, since we had been told it was rich in gold. Excuse me, Your Excellency, but I would feel happier if I could show the children a map.
Of course. Must be one somewhere. Does anyone have a map we could use?
Yeah, we have one here.
Much better. We set out from Java here and sailed to the Moluccas, from where we headed southeast. It was about here that I saw the New Guinea coast, and we sailed along it for several days, charting it as we went. I then decided that it was time to go ashore to try to make contact with the people. That was a mistake. A terrible mistake. We had only gone a little way when we were set upon by savage natives. 8 of my men, almost half my crew were killed, and the rest of us were lucky to be alive.
Were they cannibals?
I do not know, but I certainly was not going to go ashore again and ask them. Instead, we followed the coast until we found our way blocked by shallows. We therefore set a new course to the south, and soon sighted land again to the east. We were in pretty bad shape by this time. Our food and water supplies were running low. We followed the coast, hoping to find either a break in the land or a place to replenish our supplies.
And did you?
No, neither. As you probably guessed by now, the coastline I had been following south was actually that of Australia. Finally, early in 1606, we found a place which looked as if it might have fresh water. We went ashore in the ship's boat and had begun our search when a group of natives approached us, waving spears and strange-looking clubs. We had no option but to retreat to the Bicentennial, and giving up our exploration, turned for home.
Well done, Willem. A good story, well told. And a lot more dramatic than my own landings, that's for sure. Dirk Hartogson, although most people call me Hartog. Now, that's the bit I discovered in 1616.
Even if it was by accident.
There's truth in that, Your Excellency. A lucky accident. But then, you make your own luck, I always say.
And just how did you make this good luck, Dirk?
Well, by being adventurous, of course. You see, when we first started sailing to the Indies, we used to travel via the old Portuguese route, around the Cape of Good Hope, up the African coast, then across the Indian Ocean. But this was so painfully slow, and we are always constantly battling against the wind and the currents. Fortunately, a skipper of ours thought about using the Roaring Forties to power our ships across the southern Indian Ocean. Then we could swing north to the islands.
Wasn't that Brower?
Yeah, it was indeed. And later, all VOC ships traveling to the Indies used Brower's route. But back in 1616, when we first left Holland, it was still considered unreliable. But nevertheless, I decided to risk it, and was surprised to discover several islands and a large mainland where our chart showed nothing. Therefore, I investigated and mapped the region, to which I gave the name Andrak's Land, Andrak being the name of my ship. before leaving, I had the plate engraved with some of the details of the ship and the crew, and of course the date on which I made the discovery, and affixed it to a post as a reminder of our visit.
Not noted for his modesty, Dirk.
In fact, some of our sailors using the new route sighted parts of the Southland after that.
And they all added their bit to our knowledge of the Southland, although he gave us little in the way of trade. Willem himself later mapped a section of coast north of Eendrachtsland, and Friedrich de Houtman here a good stretch to the south.
As well as some very low, very dangerous islands, which I saw could be a threat to other ships. So I named them Abrolas, which means open your eyes in Portuguese.
Anyway, we were beginning to have a good idea of what the west coast of the Southland was like. And we had mapped a considerable distance along the southern coast. But we had no idea what lay beyond this point. In order to find out, one of my successors, Governor Anthony van Diemen, planned a major expedition to be led by Abel Tasman. I thought I saw him here earlier. Have any of you seen Tasman?
Yeah. He was over by the Batavia last I saw him.
Ah, yes, there he is. Come, children. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time.
Good afternoon, Your Excellency.
Good afternoon, Abel. Children, this is Abel Tasman, who made not one but two voyages of exploration to the Southland, or, as he named it, New Holland.
Yeah, and had Governor van Diemen given us ships like this, beauty here, instead of the Heemskerk and Zeehan, who knows how many new lands we would have discovered, Francois?
Well, it certainly would have got us off to a better start.
But what was wrong with your ships?
They were rotting, falling to bits. We were only a few days out of Batavia, which by then was our main base in the East Indies, before it became clear that the mast and spars were not going to last the voyage. We had no choice but to head for Mauritius, where we spent 5 weeks refitting our ships before we were ready to restart our expedition.
Even then we had some doubts about them.
Yeah.
Then why did you go on?
Because there are always risks on such voyages, and because we wanted to go on. So, in October 1642, we at last headed across the Indian Ocean toward New Holland. Only we deliberately sailed further south than those parts of the continent already shown on our maps. In about the middle of November, we sighted land, which I called Van Diemen's Land, after the governor. I then raised the company flag before heading to the east once more.
What's the other land?
I called that Statenland, which I understand you now call New Zealand. It was more promising land than any I had seen before in the region. But the local inhabitants were a most fierce people. The first time we tried to go ashore to speak to them, a war party in canoes attacked our longboat and killed 4 of my men. I called the place Murderer's Bay and headed north toward more friendly islands, where we were able to rest and restock our supplies, which were almost gone. From there, we were able to sail north to New Guinea and return to Batavia.
And what about your second voyage?
Yeah, it was very soon after the first, in 1644. It was much shorter and along the north coast. Much of the coast of that continent had already been mapped, but there were gaps, and our aim was to fill them in, as you said, We also hoped to perhaps find a passage to the south or east. But I charted all the way from New Guinea to the west coast here, and there was no such passage. However, I had, through both my voyages, been able to establish that this continent of yours is an island, not joined to any other southern continent.
By now, we had an almost complete picture of Australia. Although we had not charted the eastern coast, our maps told us everything that was known about New Holland.
Perhaps you would like one of those maps for your project?
Sure thing.
That can be arranged, can't it, Your Excellency?
It's already done.
Yeah.
You might like this as well. It's a souvenir of the plate which I left at Shark Bay. And another of our explorers, Willem de Vlaming, found and brought back to Holland.
Well, thanks, Mr. Hartog. What a treasure.
Did I hear someone say something about treasure? You.
Easy, Dirk.
What's up?
William Dampier, buccaneer. We Dutch have no love for such pirates.
Why's he here anyway?
Well, pirate or not, he was the first Englishman to land here.
I can understand, Gaudy, that you would wish to speak to this man, but perhaps If you don't mind, you will excuse us for now.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your help.
And thanks for these.
They're a sensitive lot, that's for sure. William Dampier, adventurer, buccaneer, writer, and captain in His Majesty's Navy at your service.
Then perhaps you'd be kind enough to tell the children of your exploits. Regarding Australia.
Of course. Well, as I have said, I'm an adventurer and a buccaneer. Our ship, the Signet, went wherever there was a chance of a rich prize, which was what brought me here to this Australia of yours. But the Dutch were right. It were a most inhospitable land, and we did not stay long. That were in 1688. Because it was not long after that I decided this piracy was becoming a bit too risky. So I tossed it in and returned to England. I thought by writing a book about my adventures, I might be able to gain some fame. But I'll be keelhauled if it wasn't the British Admiralty that took the most interest in me. They made me captain in the British Navy and put me on a ship to find out more about this place at New Holland. Well, the Navy life was not for me. All that discipline. Oh, and the officers were a right uppity lot, I can tell you. Anyway, come 1699, I'm back up the coast of New Holland. And it hadn't changed any while I was away. The water was full of sharks. Oh, I named one of the places where we anchored Shark Bay. And the land, it's the most desolate country I'd ever seen. The only inhabitants were the natives. Oh, and some strange sort of animal that hopped on its hind legs.
Kangaroos?
I beg your pardon?
It sounds like you're talking about kangaroos.
Well, I have no interest in them anyway, or the country.
Well, we have. And you might change your mind if you could see what it's like now.
And I must beg to differ with your opinion of the flora and fauna of the country, sir. As a botanist, I found the plant and wildlife of this land fascinating.
And who might you be?
Banks. Sir Joseph Banks. A visitor to this vast and beautiful land aboard His Majesty's ship Endeavour under Lieutenant James Cook.
Navy, eh? Enough said. Anyway, you've heard my tale. I'll leave you with the aristocracy.
Matt. I take it that's short for Matthew, right? And Lisa, how do you do? Please do not be too quick to judge us all by the likes of him.
Who's that?
Dampier.
Oh, that pirate. I cannot understand how they can make the likes of him a captain. I'm dreadfully sorry. James Cook, Royal Navy.
And one of the finest navigators ever to put to sea. As I was saying, I sailed with James here to explore the Pacific in 1768.
Why?
Pardon? I don't think I quite understand your question.
Well, I can understand why sailors would go off exploring the world, but you said you're a scientist. Why would you want to go on such a long sea voyage?
I see. Well, you know, the 18th century was the beginning of the scientific age. We wanted to know more about our Earth, and that meant going to new places to see what lived there. When I heard of this expedition to the Pacific, I decided it was too good a chance to miss out on.
Perhaps I should explain that the expedition was originally formed to go to Tahiti, to observe the transit of Venus. But we were also to explore more of the Pacific and see if we could locate Terra Australis.
I could not have wished for better. The Pacific Islands had such a huge range of plants, none of which had been properly studied. I was making more discoveries than the captain.
We stayed in the Pacific for almost 2 years, and the rewards were great indeed. In October 1769, we sighted land in the region of Tasman-Staten Land, which we called New Zealand. And we spent the next 6 months charting the islands.
Then we set sail to the west once again. By now it was well into 1770, and by April of that year we finally sighted the east coast of New Holland.
Is that a map you have there?
Yes.
Oh, but it's Dutch.
Ah, then in that case, fetch me my charts and bring them to that table.
Aye, aye, Captain.
My cabin boy will bring us the charts of my voyage. You know, some of the map makers at the time had already drawn in the East Coast, or their version of the East Coast on the Dutch charts. And some of them were quite inventive, although you wouldn't want to sail on them. Here is the route I followed from Tahiti to New Zealand and westwards across the Tasman Sea. And this is my chart of the east coast of New Holland. This is the land, and here is the coast. From the south near you to the north, closest to me. Here is where we sighted land, a place I call Point Hicks from where we sailed north.
Look, here's Botany Bay.
We spent quite some time there, and I was able to collect some of the strangest specimens, unlike anything I'd ever seen before.
Both Sir Joseph and I felt there was a great deal of promise in this land, and we named a good many places as we continued our way north.
What are these?
Reefs. They extend all the way up this coast. We had to be constantly on the lookout. And even then, we still struck one of them.
Did you sink?
Oh, but we had some anxious moments, I can tell you. We had to man the pumps for 2 days before we could find a suitable place to beach the Endeavour and repair the hull.
And it was fortunate that we did. To have travelled all that way for so long, and then lose all my beautiful drawings and specimens would have been too much.
Aye, it would have been a disaster after such a successful voyage. But we were able to repair her and to keep sailing north, until we came to the straits through which the Spaniard Torres must have sailed. So having reached the northernmost point of the continent, I went ashore on a nearby island to take possession in the name of King George III of England.
Pardon, Monsieur Capitaine, just to clear a point.
Do you wish to dispute something?
Francois Eleanor, Comte de Saint-Albert. But no, Captain Cook, I merely wish to point out to the children that you did not take possession of the whole country. No?
That is correct. I took possession of the part known as New South Wales. But what is that to you French? You made no claim on New Holland.
Not on the East Coast, to be sure, but I myself, Captain, took possession of the West Coast just 2 years later, in 1772.
I was not aware, Comte de Saint-Albert, that you had taken possession, although of course I knew of your later French interest in the West Coast. I would be most interested to hear about it.
I'm sure we all would be, Comte.
My name you already know. I owned a plantation on the Ile-de-France, the Mauritius. But in 1771, I joined an expedition which had set out in search of the great southern land. I was made captain of one of the ships, the Gravante. And we duly set out into the cold and largely unknown waters of the southern Indian Ocean. We were very fortunate to discover some islands early in the voyage, and our leader, Kerguelen, believing them to be of great significance, returned to France. For my part, I was to continue east in search of other land.
I do not envy you, sailing so far south.
It was a terrible ordeal. My men were suffering from the bitter cold, made worse by hunger. Finally, unable to continue, I decided to turn northeast and head for the nearest land I could find.
The southwest corner of New Holland.
Correct. Cape Loon, the Dutch call it. We made landfall near the Cape in March of 1772, anchoring in a nearby bay. Having restocked with fresh fish, we made our way north, anchoring again in Shark Bay. The Dutch had shown no interest in the country, so at Shark Bay, I took possession of all of the land to the south, and as far east as 135 degrees for France.
My dear Comte de Saint-Albert, thank you for telling me this. If you'll excuse me, I have some friends who'll be very interested in your claim. Are you coming, James?
Nice meeting you, Isabella.
Pleasure, monsieur.
And you too, of course. You may have this for your project. We can't be outdone by the Dutch now, can we?
Thank you.
I'm sorry, but I have no map for you.
That's all right. Were you the first Frenchman to land in Australia?
No, I just missed out on that honor. An expedition led by Marion Dufresne arrived in Tasmania less than 1 month before I reached Lewin. But he was stopping a short while only before sailing for New Zealand, where, I'm very sad to say, he was killed by Maoris.
Seems such a waste.
We all took risks. Many died on such long voyages. One of the great heroes of French exploration, the Comte de la Pérouse, is believed to have been killed in the Pacific Islands. Indeed, so great was the concern in France that an expedition was organized to find him. If you like, I could introduce you to Admiral Bruni d'Entrecasteaux, who led the expedition. Come.
Francois, where have you been? We were about to send out a search party.
That would have indeed been most appropriate, Admiral, for I was telling Matt and Lisa about the expedition you led in search of La Pérouse. Children, may I leave you with Admiral Joseph Antoine Bruni, Chevalier d'Entrecasteaux.
A pleasure, mademoiselle.
Are you always called by that name? I don't think I can remember it all.
Then you may call me simply d'Entrecasteaux or Admiral. I answer to either. But to the business at hand, no? We set out from France in 1791 to search for La Perouse and to survey parts of the Australian coast not claimed by England. For over a year, we chased false leads for La Perouse. Then we decided to move on to the second part of our mission. We restocked at the Spice Islands. Do you know where they are?
Yeah.
Good. Because of strong southerly winds, we could not sail close to the west coast, but sailed wide, swinging back to reach land here, near Cape Lewin, and following the coast east. This we intended to do at a leisurely pace to allow our scientists to explore. But a fierce storm drove us along here, and had it not been for our excellent ships, the French frigate was without doubt the best ship of the day, and the brave crew, we would not have made it safely through these treacherous islands. But even so, the ships needed repairs. But this gave our scientists the chance to go ashore for the first time. Scientists. All the time it is, when are we going ashore? Can we go ashore yet? And what happens when they do go ashore? Huh? They get lost. This is what happens, and we have to waste time and water looking for them. Even so, they did make some interesting finds, both here and in Tasmania, where they were able to spend more time studying not only the plants and animals, but also the people of this strange land. You can have this. It is the journal of one of my scientists. You may find it interesting.
Thanks.
It is nothing. From Tasmania, we set out once again into the Pacific to resume our search for La Perouse, but again without success. In fact, the expedition had taken such a toll on us that I and many of my men did not live to return to France. But this was perhaps a blessing.
How can you say that?
Mademoiselle, France was in as much trouble as we were. The revolution had begun, and it was a bloody time indeed. The France to which we would have returned was very different to the France from which we sailed.
But not necessarily worse, I think. Change has always painful, mademoiselle, but not always bad. Had it not been for the revolution and its new ideals, I might never have had the chance to lead an expedition to Australia.
Who are you?
Captain Nicholas Baudin, mademoiselle. And our expedition was the greatest scientific expedition ever to leave Europe under sail, with no less than 63 scientists and officers on board our two ships. 3 years we spent in Australian waters from 1801 to 1803, collecting specimens of plant and animal life, charting the coast, and recording the details of many, many, many more specimens. Like the Admiral, we concentrated our efforts on the south coast and the west coast of the mainland, and Tasmania. And like the Admiral, I had to put up with the continual demands of the scientists.
What was that about the scientists, Captain?
Oh, Perron. Children, this is Francois Perron, one of the scientists who made the journey with me, and who, I must say, wrote a very detailed account of the expedition.
With a great deal of help, especially from my friend, Louis de Freycinet. But where is Louis?
No doubt he is off on his own somewhere. I believe I have never encountered such a headstrong young man. But he did produce some fine maps.
Oh, isn't that the de Freycinets heading this way?
Capitan, look who I had the good fortune to bump into.
Matthew Flinders.
We meet again, Nicholas.
You must let me introduce you properly. Allow me to introduce Louis de Freycinet, Rose de Freycinet, who, from all accounts, is even more headstrong than her husband.
And this is Matthew Flinders, an English navigator who I met when our paths crossed off the southern coast in 1802.
Did you know I named that place Encounter Bay in honor of our meeting?
I had no idea. You must tell us more.
Am I interrupting your story, or do you want to hear about it?
Well, I think we should.
Well, I first came to New South Wales in 1795. And on the long trip out, I became great friends with a surgeon, George Bass. He was mad about exploration. He was even bringing his own rowing boat, which he called the Tom Thumb, to the colony. I caught the bug from him. And over the next year and a bit, we made several trips up the New South Wales coast in that boat. George made another trip to the south in a whaleboat. And when he returned to Sydney, he said he believed there was an opening between Van Diemen's Land, that's Tasmania, and the mainland. As a result, we were given a ship with which to prove the theory. And in 1798, we did just that by circumnavigating the island. There's one of those gaps you referred to had been filled in, but there were lots more. In 1800, I went home to England, and while there, I got Sir Joseph Banks to help me argue for a large expedition to complete the mapping of the entire coastline.
A good choice. Sir Joseph is a very influential man.
Thank goodness for that. When we were due to leave on our expedition, the British would not allow French vessels to leave port. It was only Sir Joseph's efforts on our behalf that enabled us to sail for Australia.
And I doubt I would have returned to Australia so quickly had it not been for him. At least, not in command of my own ship, the Investigator, and with orders to do just what I had requested, map the entire Australian coastline. On my way back from England, I landed at King George Sound and worked my way along the south coastline until we reached Sydney again. And of course, it was on this part of my journey that I met Captain Bowdoin, here in 1802.
We thought we might meet you in Sydney while we were having our ships repaired, but unfortunately, by the time we reached the settlement, you had already left to map the north coast.
Well, the south coast and Tasmania were complete, so where else could I go but north? I charted a safe passage through the Great Barrier Reef and another through Torres Strait into the Gulf of Carpentaria. But the Investigator was in poor state by now. The timbers were rotting, and so we only managed to map as far as Arnhem Land before being forced to make for Kupang for repairs. Unfortunately, however, sickness broke out aboard ship, so I decided to cut short my stay and my explorations and return to Sydney as quickly as I could. It was obvious that the Investigator was never going to complete my mission. So I set out from New South Wales in 1803 to return to England, hopefully to get another ship. But I'm afraid, Nicholas, the governor of Mauritius was no explorer. And since England and France were once again at war, he imprisoned me for almost 7 years. By the time I got back to England, Monsieur Perron here, with the help of Louis, had already published his Voyage of Discovery.
Oh, but Captain...
No, please. Worse things happen in times of war. And anyway, I see that Australia, the name which I prefer to use for New Holland, has now been officially adopted for your country. So, I feel as though I have achieved something.
I think that perhaps you have done better than we have.
How's that, Louis?
Well, this continual fighting with England only served to cost France its claim to Australia. And our work was all largely done in vain.
Excuse me, madame.
Yes, child.
Why did he say you were headstrong?
Oh, that. Because when Louis, my husband, sailed on his second voyage to Australia in 1818, I stowed away aboard his ship.
Really?
Certainly. I was found out, of course, and by then it was too late to turn back.
Matt, you'll never
I'm
believe...
sorry, Lisa. Pardon me, Madame de Freycinet, but we're running short of time. And there is someone I think we ought to meet. Excuse me, Lieutenant.
Yes, Guardian.
Matt, Lisa, I'd like you to meet Philip Parker King.
My pleasure. I must say, I feel a little lost amongst such distinguished company.
Why? Aren't you an explorer?
Well, yes. I charted quite a deal of the north and northwest coast, as did others. But it seems as if these gentlemen had already done the hard part.
Nevertheless, Lieutenant King occupies a very important position in this story. He was the first of the maritime explorers to be born in the colony, and I fear the last we shall have time to meet.
What are you doing?
We have a small wager as to who has the best map.
Is this map of yours accurate?
Oh, very.
Very well, I concede.
This is very interesting. How is it made?
They take pictures from space.
You may as well have this for what it's worth.
And this.
No, I'm sorry, but our time is up, and you've got your project to get started on.
But there's so many questions.
Another time, perhaps, in another library. Have you got your things?
You. But how do we get back to the shop?
You'll be there sooner than you think. I hope I've been of some small service.
Thank you.
It's been great.
It's all right. You can have those.
Thanks.